Ambassador, thank you very much for joining us. How would you characterise the current state of economic ties between the two countries?
Well, thank you for asking. They're good. They're good. It's the 10th years of our free trade agreement, and we had a solid trade all through these 10 years with the free trade agreement. We actually had a growth of 70%, and the trade is more or less balanced, so China exporting about the same amount of goods in value to Switzerland as we export to China in value. And on the investment side, we still have growth. It's shifting a little bit from one sector to others, but we're still opening new Swiss companies here in China.
Fantastic. I understand it's at 700 and counting, the amount of companies operating in China, Swiss companies?
We have another 230, 250 in Hong Kong, but these are mostly rep offices, and altogether in China we have about 1,000 companies.
Fantastic. And what are the key sectors of trade growth, perhaps the top three that you see driving this relationship, and how do you see it evolving in the coming years?
Currently the biggest sector is pharmaceuticals, and that is the sector which has really been growing over the past years. I think it has something to do with the very innovative companies that we have in Switzerland, but also with the aging Chinese population, and also the Chinese population that requires more and more health services because they're becoming more wealthier and can afford it. Then the second is luxury and watches, and but also jewelry and so on. So that is the consumer market, the Chinese consumer market. And the third is the machine industry. And there we had the most considerable shift, because I think the Swiss machine industry is maybe losing share of the total exports from Switzerland to China, but it's certainly the sector where we had the most investment, and they are producing now in China. And this makes a very important bulk of the Swiss companies that are active here in China.
Excellent. And this year marked the 10th anniversary of the China-Switzerland Free Trade Agreement. Now, what have you seen as the most significant outcomes of the FTA thus far?
We actually did celebrate it. The Free Trade Agreement entered into force on 1st of July, 10 years ago. And the day of the Free Trade Agreement entering into force, we had a meeting between our Minister of Economics, Guy Parmelin, Federal Councillor, and Mr. Wang Wentao, the Chinese Minister of Trade, and they met all the Swiss chambers of commerce here in China, here in Beijing, and it was a really memorable event.
Wonderful. What do you see as being the greatest outcomes of the last 10 years for that FTA?
I mentioned the figure, plus 70%. That's substantial. So our trade grew net by 70%. And the utilization rate of the free trade agreement on the Swiss side is very high. It's more than 70%, so we can call it a mature free trade agreement. And because it's mature, we talk about its enhancement, and that is the chapter to come.
I understand both countries plan to start talks to upgrade that free trade agreement soon. How do you see, under the FTA, 99% of Chinese exports to Switzerland, 96% of Swiss exports to China enjoy zero tariffs? What does Switzerland want to see on the table, and what constitutes that remaining 4%?
Well, first of all, it's 4% which are not touched at all, but there are certain products which have tariffs which are lowered, but they still exist. But what we want to see is mostly better cooperation with China in many fields, and we think that we should also have, except for the tariffs, we should have more elements on environment, we should have more dialogue elements on labor laws, and we should also have better settlement mechanisms in that, in that enhanced agreement. But what's currently the state of play is that both ministers have signed a declaration that they are finalizing the internal procedures to get the negotiation mandates, and then after, that would be the next step, would be the opening of the negotiations.
To perhaps longer term considerations, how do you see the economic relationship between Switzerland and China over perhaps the next decade?
Economic relations between Switzerland and China are always also a function of world trade and world trade relations. So Switzerland is an avid free trader. We are a country which really wants to have trade with all the countries in the world. We are a country which is very much putting its priority on innovative products, on top quality products, and we hope that we will be able to further strengthen our position in the Chinese market and keep on competing on this more and more competitive market.
At the start of this year, Switzerland removed all duties on industrial imports. Has that increased or decreased the share of China's imports to Switzerland?
I don't really have the figures yet for this year, and I don't know whether the effect is significant. But Switzerland is a country which is so international that when we produce something, we take so many elements or components of the product from different markets, so that it's just easier for us to not put tariffs on to the components which we will re-export as a enhanced component or a finalized product after. So the Swiss government decided to show its quality as a free trader and simply skip them.
And Swiss cheese is known for having holes in it. Should it not be perhaps cheaper?
Well, I think Swiss cheese is a quality product, and everybody loves Swiss cheese. And we do sell cheese to China, but we also eat it on our own. And if the Chinese want to see that Swiss cheese really is worth its money, then they should just see us eating it at the same price.
Coming up next, as China continues to advance its high-level opening up strategy, global investors are increasingly recognizing the vast opportunities that this dynamic market offers. Turning to the studio, CGTN host speaks with Guillaume Joyet, Executive Director of SwissCham, and Gianni Di Giovanni, Chairman of Eni China, to share their insights about how companies leverage China's growth potential and strategic positioning in the global economy.
Here on BizTalk, we connect the dots, shedding light on the real stories behind the economic landscape. To better understand China's dynamism and the economies and rhythms of business, propelling new drivers of growth.
China.
We are rising up.
Chinese market.
China.
BizTalk, your window into China and the global economy. Only on BizTalk.
Well, Guillaume, it's such a great pleasure to have you with us today. So let's start with the overall business ties between China and Switzerland. How do you view the current business environment and attractiveness for Swiss businesses?
Hello, thank you very much for having me today. It's very nice. So regarding your first question, China is a very interesting country and it has a lot to offer. Recently, the Chinese market is very attractive. It has a large consumer base, and this consumer base is increasing years after year. Secondly, I think the shifting of the Chinese economy toward quality and innovation is very interesting, especially for international companies that are already located in China or want to join the Chinese market. Lastly, Switzerland is a quality and innovative countries, and I think this country can really meet the demand of the Chinese expectation towards shifting quality and innovation. Our current state between Switzerland and China is actually very good. Next year we will celebrate the 75 years of our relationship. And since 2014, we have a free trade agreement in place. And this free trade agreement helped to increase trade between our two nations. And from data-wise, it's very obvious since 2014. And we have been here actually since 1994, the Swiss Chambers of Commerce. And since then, we have helped all the Swiss companies to develop in the Chinese market and also to access the Chinese market. And we hope and we will continue to do so for the years to come.
Indeed, there have been 3 decades of close partnership. As you mentioned, China is undergoing transformation of its economic structure, and we're seeing industrial upgrading across many sectors. What new opportunities do you see?
So as I said, you have a shift toward quality and innovation, but within it, actually, you have a lot of opportunities. The first one that is very interesting is renewable energies and sustainability. China wants to become a neutral country by 2060, and companies that can offer sustainable solutions and practices, services to China have a lot of business opportunities. Secondly, I think is pharmaceutical and biotechnology companies, because China is becoming, you have a more and more larger aging population.
Yeah.
Firstly, and China is also investing a lot of money to upgrade facility cares. So companies such as Sonova for hearing aids, Roche and Novartis for pharmaceutical products, Geislich and Straumann for dental products have a lot actually to gain in this market. And actually in our SwissCham we have a life science committee where we have many companies in the life science sectors, and that is actually very good. Thirdly is digital transformation, digital economy and manufacturing. China is putting a lot of effort in manufacturing 4.0 and Internet of Things. A large part of our Swiss companies in the Chinese market have a manufacturing in China, and that actually have a lot of potential to upgrade their manufacturing to become more digital innovative in it. Thirdly is financial institution, because to shift toward quality and innovation, you need a lot of services. You need to actually invest a lot of money, and Swiss financial institutions are very strong in these sectors, and they also have a lot to gain towards this one.
So how do Swiss companies generally view China's business environment? What are their top concerns?
That is a very good question, a tough one actually. Chinese market is a very dynamic market, an interesting market. But of course there is a set of complexities and challenges. Recently we can see that Chinese government put a lot of effort in policy reform and make business operations smoother. Such as we participate to an event from the Ministry of Commerce on large-scale equipment renewal and consumer goods. And this kind of policies is actually very interesting for Swiss companies. However, there is also a set of challenges. Policies change, intellectual protection in China, and local competition. Local competition is becoming more and more fierce, and as I always said, if you come to the Chinese market, you go to the best. So you need already to be the best before you join the Chinese markets. Despite all of these challenges, China has a lot to offer, but you need to remain flexible and to understand the local competition. If you can do this, you have a lot to gain, because China is a very large country.
And what is your assessment of the supply chain between China and Switzerland, which is, supply chain issue has become a challenge globally? How to foster secure and resilient supply chain between the two sides?
China has, we can say, among the best supply chain in the world. Right? They invested a lot in infrastructures. They have very good trains. They have very good highways. They have even from Chengdu, you can go directly to Europe by train. That is actually very interesting. And what is even more interesting for me is the shift toward a high quality supply chain. Swiss companies actually are known for producing high quality goods, and nowadays in China you are able to produce high quality products, and that is a shift that we saw really in the last few years, and I believe that China will become even more high-tech supply chain in the world. However, how to make it more resilient between Switzerland and China? Firstly, you have transparency. To be transparent with your suppliers, with your partners, is always very important. To foster long-term relationship with your suppliers, because China is a people country, so to talk to them, to maintain contact is very important. There is always this hot topic of green supply chain. To have a green supply chain to meet the demand of producing everything sustainable is and will be more and more important in the future. And lastly, I would say the digitalization of the supply chain. Digitalization of the supply chain, I mean by that integration of AI into your supply chain, but also Internet of Things, the blockchain, that can make the supply chain smoother and the transition between goods smoother and easier to actually know where your good is.
Very interesting points. And lastly, we know SwissCham has long contributed to the deepening business and economic ties between the two countries. In your opinion, what can be done to further enhance this partnership?
We can say that already this partnership is very good. Trade and investment between our two countries have been growing for a long time. But to make it even better, I have a few points to consider. One is to encourage green path regulatory procedures. That is to make business operations smoother, to be able to register your product quicker and easier. That is actually well appreciated from international companies. You of course, as our bilateral agreement, we have a free trade agreement. Upgrading the free trade agreement is very important, but any other type of bilateral agreement that can be signed is always interesting for businesses. One more is cultural exchange. Switzerland and China have very different cultures. So for Swiss people to be able to access China, to be able to visit China and to understand what is the local culture is very important. We can see that with the visa-free policy, 14 days visa-free policy, but also I hope to see more Chinese people coming to Switzerland, and they can also actually get to know Switzerland. And lastly, for me it's very important, is the support to Swiss SMEs, or to the support to SMEs in general, because SMEs, they are the motor of the economy, right? They represent 90% of the companies in China, at least from our side, 90% of our Swiss companies in China are SMEs, and they sometimes have limited means. And to be able to support them and to develop smoothly in the Chinese market is very important. We have been doing that since a long time, and we will, of course, put a lot of effort to continue to support them in the future.
I think our goals align. We will also aim to provide more support for SMEs, no matter it's domestic ones or foreign ones. Thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you very much.
.360-degree profiles of industry movers and shakers, tech mavericks, and policymakers. We drill down on their success. We ask how they set strategy and how they navigate in an increasingly competitive market. Real talk, real business. Join the conversation. BizTalk, only on CGTN.
Mr. Giovanni, thank you so much for joining us. So how would you expect this visit of Prime Minister Meloni to strengthen bilateral economic ties?
Prime Minister Li Qiang and Prime Minister Meloni use two keywords. Premier Li Qiang said, who found a friend will find a treasure. And Mrs. Meloni said, reciprocity is the key word for the relationship for China and Italy. So I think that these two keywords are the real best expectation about this bilateral event.
And ahead of the trip, Prime Minister Meloni said her 5-day trip was a demonstration of the will to begin a new phase to relaunch our bilateral cooperation. So what underlying factors are driving this renewed dynamism in Italian-Chinese relations?
Well, I think that economy is one of the most relevant issue in the relationship from China, for renovated good relationship from China and Italy. I think that energy and fight against the climate change will be one of the most important area of strained collaboration from China and Italy about companies, about technology, about research and development, about strong commitment to grant for the Chinese people and European and Italian people a better life.
And how do you view emerging opportunities for closer China-Italy business cooperation in light of the newly announced 3-year action plan?
The new 3-action plan was, in my view, very important for the new role of China, because China is the second power in the world. So his role is to lead and give to the rest of the world an important example of style of life, of style of government, of style of business. I think that Italy can do a lot in this situation, because the Italy role in this moment in the European Union can grant to the China's friend an important gate to explain better their point of view, they explain better his policy, and create more comprehensive environment around the two continents.
What is your company's strategy to adapt to China's evolving market and policy landscape, particularly in the context of China's goals for renewable energy and carbon neutrality by 2060?
14 plans and the update, the successive update about the decarbonization strategy of China, it's a very relevant for the world, first of all. So Eni, it's invested many billions in China in the last year, and would like to continue this pattern in biofuels area for most of time, and the faster recharger unit for the service station in the cities. We are working with a Chinese company, with the CSC counterpart, to build the new station with the swapping area and fast recharging area for the new EV that became an incredible reality in China. Out of that, CCS and CCUS will be a new opportunity for take the most cleaner and efficient energy for China.
You talked about China's EV industry. We know China has become a leader in the industry, but there are also some trade frictions arising in this area. What is your take?
Mrs. Meloni say reciprocity. Reciprocity means we have to understand the different market and the different behavior in the market. Europe got a very relevant automotive industry, and we have to grant common and equal opportunities for everybody. We are very happy to receive the Chinese e-vehicles, but we have to grant for our industry fair and equal condition in the market.
In the future, how is Eni collaborating with China in the area of technology advancement to drive the upgrading of energy solutions?
We are collaborating with many companies and many researcher and development center, university center in China about the biofuels and all about needs for producing biofuels. China is an incredible place for the feedstock. Probably it's considered one of the most relevant place in the world to producing feedstock like UCO, used cooking oil, and the aviation industry needs the SAF, the sustainable aircraft fuel. It's an important field to collaborate, even hydrogen, the green hydrogen, and the nuclear power, the modern nuclear power, with less impact on the environment.
So will your company consider increase your investment in China?
We are interested to increase our position in China. For a company like us, so when we have to grow, we have to imagine some investments in many fields. So it depends from policy and regulation, obviously, depends from the availability and the collaboration of the other big company in China, but our intention is positive to the country.